Good evening, councillors, staff, members of the public and those watching on live streaming. Welcome to our agenda forum. Agenda forums are specifically for agenda items which are to be considered by council at the next ordinary meeting of council. Agenda forums are not a decision-making forum. They provide an opportunity for councillors to be equally informed and seek additional information on matters prior to the presentation of such matters to the next ordinary meeting of council for formal consideration and decision. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed. The recording will also be archived and made available on the council's website after the meeting. If you choose to participate in a meeting during public question time and deputation time, it is assumed that your consent is given for the audio to be recorded. Please keep your comments respectful to council and other members of the community. Visual images of the public will not be captured. Attendance, leave of absence, Mr CEO.
Mr Mayor, I have one from Councillor Lucas requesting leave of absence from October 29th through until the 12th of November, and that will be considered next week, Mr Mayor.
Okay, are there any others? No. Apologies. I have an apology from Councillor Podovnik. Are there any others? And Councillor Richardson. Thank you. No others.
Everyone else is present. Thank you.
Declaration of financial and proximity interest and interest affecting impartiality, Mr CEO.
Mr Mayor, Councillor David Lucas has expressed a financial interest in item 4.8. That's a retrospective application for Boshwood fencing at Lot 15, number 36, Maxwell Road, Caversham, in that is received reimbursement from WA Grape Growers from the adjoining property. Councillor Kevin Bailey has expressed a financial interest in item 4.5, that is the proposed use and associated development of an artificial insemination centre at Lot 1780, number 46, Gaston Road in Bullsbrook. Councillor Kevin Bailey's expressed an impartiality in item 5.2, that is the Woolacott Avenue upgrade, in that Mr Purvis is his co-driver in an upcoming rally event. Councillor Mel Congleton, it must be, that's his signature, but not at the top, but we'll fix that in a minute. Item 4.7, he's expressed an impartiality in item 4.7, that's the proposed childcare premises, lot 490 and 491, number 7 Norman Street in Bellevue, in that his neighbour opposite was a former customer. Councillor Congleton has expressed an impartiality in item 4.5, that is the proposed use and associated development of an artificial insemination centre, in that the Burgess Group have acted for him as in one of his companies in the past. And that's all I have, Mr Mayor. And it is a financial. Could I have that? Thank you.
Any further declarations from councillors or staff? Thank you. We now go to public question time and questions relating to reports contained in the agenda. Questions for which due notice has been given. I have nil. Questions without notice. Any questions from the gallery without notice? Councillors, that takes us now to reports and motions for which previous notice has been given. We have written deputations on 4.1. 4.2, a written deputation on 4.4. On 4.5 we have a number of in-person deputations. We have one written from Mr Greg Neves and also an in-person. So is Mr Neves with us? No. I do apologise, I misread that. Yep. Okay. So there is an in-person on 4.4. Dale and Mr Lee Mettlejan, I assume you're with us. Okay, who's speaking? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dale. If you could just come there and turn the microphone on, and you have 5 minutes.
Mr Mayor, Mr CEO and councillors, in regards to 50 Robinson Road, lot 182, Herne Hill, of a second dwelling. My grandfather came from Yugoslavia and started the introduction of the Mettlejan name into the Swan Valley. I am now fourth generation in the Swan. My parents bought the property, 50 Robinson Road, in 1980. And yes, at the time, the 8.5 acre property was under vineyard. Approximately 3 seasons, the income was not sustainable and was turned into a horse property. I'm second generation on this property, and my children, or our children, are third generation growing up and will be fifth generation in the Swan. The property has run as a horse establishment since approximately 1983 and was registered with the City of Swan in approximately 2008 with all rules and regulations for the use and purpose of an equine establishment. The reason for a second dwelling at Lot 182 Robinson Road is that Mum and Dad are getting older. It gives us the chance to help with the property management and for Mum and Dad to stay at the property until their day's end. As myself and my wife both work away in the mining sector, my parents play a huge role with my kids as well, or with our kids. We as a family have always wished for the property to stay in our family name and our children can enjoy the lifestyle and the safety growing up as we did. The property will always stay as a horse property and as long as we're there. We situate the house so the least amount of paddock is being used and where it does not affect the running of the property. The house can be moved if required due to it's a demountable or a modular home. Thank you.
Okay. Councillors, any questions of Mr Middlejan? None? Thank you, Dale. Councillors, that takes us to the next one, which is item 4.5, which is the proposed use and associated development artificial insemination centre at lot 178046 Gaston Road. And we have 3 councillors declared a interest in this one, so I'll hand over to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. It's item 4.5, councillors, on page 413 of the agenda. We have 4 speakers tonight, and the first speaker is Mr Greg Neves, speaking against the recommendation. Mr Neves, if you can go to the microphone, please. You have 5 minutes to make your deputation. Thank you.
Do I press this here?
No, it's on. It's on.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks, Shire members. I'm very close to the piggery. We call the piggery not our AI centre as it's aptly described in the documents. It's a piggery in every sense of the word. And in saying that, I'm strongly against the Newell Ferguson Steve Lamont piggery plan. In the details, I look through all the submissions and I'll see words that glare at me, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I'll see words like likely to comply. I see pig squealing expected to comply. I see additional treatments, formal silencers, acoustic enclosures, acoustic absorption lining, all those sort of things that that really red lights to me. The reason being, I've been a stock agent for 47 years. I'm probably the second oldest one in the state at the moment before I retire, but I've had a lot to do with pigs. I was an auctioneer at Bourne for 10 years selling pigs, and I know them pretty well. Lovely animals, great for bacon and eggs, but not so good when you live next door to them, unfortunately. So there is things with pigs that need to be, clearly defined. And I do note for the Shire, I'm a bit disappointed that the Shire actually, they're saying that it seems to be a good idea. That really disappoints me. I see if the number of objections, local people, 107 rejections, 97 that want the piggery there, that's a pretty clear no vote. I understand that there's 234 submissions in total, and obviously there's 120 outsiders that aren't residents, so I understand that too, but a very clear no vote from the people around there for obvious reasons. And yet the Shire has taken the position to go forward with this as a recommendation. So, when you go against, well, what's the good things about it for somebody, for the Bullsbrook Shire? Well, all I can see, quite honestly, is 2 employees. That's all it's done. 2 employees. That's all. That's the good thing about it. The against, well, plenty of smell, plenty of noise, attracts flies. If you've never a piggery, I suppose you haven't been to many piggers. I have. Flies are a very common source. They love the smell of pigs. Come from all over the place. You have a land devaluation immediately, because who wants to live beside a piggery? I'm sure Kevin wouldn't like to live beside a piggery or even well, even any of the people in this room don't like to be beside piggeries, so straight away that becomes an issue. You'll have a constant ongoing argument with the neighbours due to noise, smells, clear nights when the wind doesn't move and smell hangs around and you've got a problem, then you've got to go out and record it, and on it goes, and shire issues, and it just carries on forever. Piggeries are one of those things that are always in contention. Also, I go back to the reports. You've got the Burgess report and the Yarrow report. They clearly say that 1.5 to 2 kilometres are from any sensitive areas. I'm not sure what sensitive inclines. Well, there is a list here. We'll go a bit further. But when you've got residences right next door, like Johnny Lee, 250 metres, Donny Manalini, Jackie Morant, Maverick and Amber Botel, Bonomies, Robbie Lyon, me, right next door. I mean, that's not sensitive, or nothing is. I'm a bit disappointed with that. It's obviously going to impact on our life big time. It's got to be taken into consideration. And also, it's 2020. By 2030, that area up there will be extremely valuable. It'll have brand new freeway through there. Everything's happening here. It's still going to attract every nature of business. And what are we going to do? We're going to stick a whacking great piggery right in the middle of it and say, well, thanks, business is over, boys. We don't want anybody's help but other piggeries of that low standard. In going into further to that, when it says, when you go into the Burgess report, it says that the industries that shouldn't be as sensitive, like schools, libraries, medical centres, light industrial, things like that, that won't go beside a piggery. Well, if you flip point that over and look at that clearly, well, that's saying that if you put a piggery there, those things will never be put in that area.
You have 1 minute left, thank you.
Thanks very much. So my statement is clearly a no. I think it's no with no conditions. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't apply to the general rule Zone B because it does devalue land, and I'm thinking that pretty well that covers it. There's some people that want to be here, couldn't be here because of the COVID thing, Jackie Morant being one of them, but I'm sure they'll get to cover it later on. But yeah, definitely a no. I'm thinking that block of land for sale, it's been for sale before they bought it. Obviously a plant was going to go there, that failed with that. Now they're trying to put a piggery in the same block of land. Well, I guess that's bad news. They've got a block of land they kind of develop, make use of it. I understand that situation, but unfortunately impacts on lots of other people's lives, and I think it should be stopped about now. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr Neves. Councillor, any questions of Mr Neves? There are. If you could go back to the podium. Thanks, Mr Neves. Councillor Catalano first.
Thanks. How far away from the proposed piggery do you live?
I'm about somewhere between 550 to 600 metres. Yeah,
500 metres, okay. Yeah. And the closest person is 250 metres?
Johnny Lee is right behind it,
okay.
And I reckon he's right,
okay.
Yeah, 250 metres, 300 metres, yeah.
Yeah, there's no watercourses in the area or anything like that?
There's watercourses that flow around it, underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure how that's going to impact on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, all right, thank you.
Councillor Johnson, you're next.
Oh, my questions have been asked, Mr Deputy.
Any other questions, councillors?
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson.
Mr Neves, the distance of 2 kilometres, I think, is suggested for sensitive use within a distance of that from the actual centre of the place. Could you say, from your experience with pigs, that is a reasonable expectation, 2 kilometres for intensive use?
So this piggery is a little bit different. It's a boar piggery. Yeah. Now, you're probably not familiar with boars. Yeah. They're very active, they're very noisy, and they're very aggressive. And I know they've changed their feed times, and they're going to do an AI program on them, so they get pretty excited about that. A boar, when it squeals, is pretty long-reaching. It's 5 to 6 k's. You want to get right down to it. So it's a big issue here. It's not just a normal sow type piggery. It's a boar piggery. It's a boar in the centre, so they are pretty active, and they're big animals, and they make a lot of noise, and that's what goes on here, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Councillor Congdon, you have a question?
Can you just tell me, please, and I haven't been to one of these places, so
unfortunately,
councillors in the room. The squealing bit you're making reference to, is it ongoing all day, all night? Things get them excited. Food, activity, maybe AI system when they go to take semen off them, things like that. Pigs, one squeals, all of them have a crusade of squeals and they slow down again, a bit like the dog will bark and 3 other dogs will bark with it.
that type of thing. And they are pretty nauseous. And you hear, wild boars, they can pick up another boar a long way out. And unfortunately, that's part of the reason they're boars, and they're protective of the animals, and they make a lot of noise, and that's how they communicate. And that's what they do. They grunt and they squeal. Yeah. And when they're happy, they squeal more.
Any other questions, councillors? Then I thank you for your deputation, Mr Neves. The next speaker on the same item is Mr Robert Linden, Lion.
I'll have a question of staff later, Deputy Mayor.
We'll deal with all the questions with staff after all the presentations, thank you. Once again, Mr Lyon, you have 5 minutes. When you're ready, thank you.
Yeah, my name's Rob Lyons. I'm adjacent on the east side of the proposed development, and I object to the city staff recommendations for this offensive trade development. I believe that they have not properly addressed my concerns or others. The offensive trade will not enhance the rural character due to the odour, noise and dust, which would severely affect our health and our well-being. Odour and dust is pushed into the atmosphere via huge fans and can travel 2 kilometres or more with the prevailing winds. The 300 mil separation distance assessment, written in May 2000 by experts and 4 major piggery businesses, had no input from local communities and business. This is not a reasonable given sensitive land users required. Sensitive land users required 2,000 metres separation distance, so why not us? Sometimes with temperatures above 30 degrees means fans will be running all the day and into the night, polluting the air with dust, hydrogen, sulphate, ammonia and other volatile undesirable odours being pushed into the atmosphere and distributed where the wind blows. We depend on the clean breeze from the west, not a smelly stench from a pig farm. There's been many complaints made regarding piggeries and their smell is very slow action about their smell, with slow action taken to improve the situation and sometimes no action taken at all. For example, the north of Perth and the southwest. Surely planners would do some checks properly rather than saying they are satisfied with the applicant's best practice measures. Noise. The boar squeals under stress at feeding times, milking times, loading, unloading and being disturbed. Boar squeals can reach up to 115 decibels. These sounds will be heard by nearby residents. Take it from the experience, I can tell you that. Noise from the 18 industrial fans at about 80 decibels intermittently and continuously running on hot days and nights will be a nuisance. Cold air increases the noise of the level. The water quality seems to be not a problem, but anyhow, high water table and potential contamination from the piggery will affect Allenbrook. Testing recommended by the applicant for the water level in September this year would not be a true indication, as it's been a very dry year. Normally that area is flooded, and I mean flooded. The water is above the ground. Potential viruses, vermins, insects, flies, stable flies and mice will not only affect us over the stock and our stock, but the wider community area as well. And in conclusion, many businesses are changing company descriptions to fit land zones. Studies are done by companies to justify the proposal, which looks good on paper for evaluation by councils. However, the actual proposals don't seem to work out, as seen by many complaints by communities and shutdown of operations. More investigations need to be done into proper zoning areas suitable for these types of businesses by planners and developers. This would make it easy on all rather than fighting court cases where nobody wins. The piggery is not suited in the Swan coastal plains, so...
You have 1 minute left, Mr Lyon.
I've finished anyhow. So close to the Perth metropolitan area.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Being no question... Oh, Councillor Catalano?
Yes. Hi, thanks for that. I've just got a similar question. How far are you from this proposed piggery?
600 metres.
Okay, thank you.
And just remember those fans that pushes up in the air. There's no scrubbers, no filters, no nothing. It's putting that into the air. You need to take notice.
Just to follow on, Rob.
Another
if you
question, thanks.
Sorry, Rob, to get a
Mr.
late
Lyon.
question in. You're anticipating the fans are being run on cold nights as well?
It depends. I don't know. It's self-explanatory. They don't say. But if they are running on cold nights, then it's a bigger problem.
Okay, thank you.
No other questions, councillors? Then thank you for your deputation. And the next speaker on the same item is Mr. John Lee. Mr. Lee? No, not here. Then, thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Mark Szabo from Burgess Design Group. Thank you, Mr. Szabo. You'll have 5 minutes once you start.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm from Burgess Design Group and I'm representing Westport for this application. I'm just hoping to make quite a short deputation and proposal of the proposal and be here to answer any questions elected members may have. I've also got attending here with me Mr. Neil Ferguson, who's the CEO of Westport, and Mr. Richard Everson, who's the General Manager of Production, who can answer more of the detailed or technical questions you may have. I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank Phil and his team for their work on this report. It took quite a bit of work and liaison with a few government agencies to finalise and get the recommendation before you, so I want to thank them for that. The first thing I did want to confirm with elected members that this application is not for a traditional piggery. It's a boar milking facility that forms part of the artificial insemination process for pig rearing. The entire operation is basically housed inside one large shed that can accommodate up to 188 boars. There is no outdoor pens, there's no outdoor roaming areas for the animals. The fact that the animals are housed inside a shed, that significantly reduces the potential for impacts on other properties. In this instance, the shed itself is approximately 400 metres from the nearest rural dwelling, whilst the next three closest dwellings are over 700 metres away from the shed. A detailed environmental report has been provided and submitted that indicates that the proposed development will easily meet all minimum separation distances for both nose and odour issues. This has been reviewed by the City and the state environmental agencies and supported subject to a number of standard conditions. We ourselves, we've also assessed the content of the submissions made on the proposal, and we've specifically noted in one of the submissions that it makes a statement that a number of Westport properties in the state are subject to ongoing community issues regarding odour. This statement does concern us a little bit, and I did want to give elected members a bit of background on how Westport runs its operations. Westport has a number of facilities operating within Western Australia. They have 5 facilities that have been operating for quite a few years, spread from Moora, Serpentine, Jarrahdale, Kojonup and Mount Barker. And none of those facilities have been subject of a single odour complaint for a number of years. More recently, Westport in early 2019 purchased 2 additional facilities in Pinjarra and Kojonup. Those 2 facilities were being operated by their previous owners in contravention of their planning and environmental approvals, and these 2 sites were the subject of a number of community odour complaints. The level of odour complaints against those facilities was up to 40 complaints a month. Following the takeover of these 2 sites by Westport, Westport entered into a 2-year management plan with the environmental licensing authorities to update and modify the operations of those sites. Westport is now 18 months into those 2-year management plans, and they have now reduced those complaints to 1 single complaint on one of those sites in the last 9 months. The other site has had none. Now, in terms of noise, the Pinjarra site, that had a noise study that was done in August this year, and that found that a house 700 metres from the piggery recorded levels of 2 to 3 decibels, which is well below reportable levels and is not likely to create any complaints. From an operational perspective, it's also worth noting the vast majority of any odour complaints that arise from piggery operations in Western Australia, they come from the use of open ponds, the ponds that are used for the anaerobic breakdown of the waste that comes from the site. This facility has no ponds, and therefore that reduces and takes away pretty much that whole odour issue.
You have 1 minute left. Thank you, Mr Szabo.
Thank you. Hopefully this information provides a little bit of context and background to help you elected members on this application, and we're obviously here to answer any other further questions you may have. Thank you.
Councillor Scanlon, you're first.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. I have a few questions arising from your presentation. And so you mentioned the 5 facilities that Westport operate. I'd like to know, of those 5 facilities, where is the nearest properties?
I'd have to defer to any of those facilities?
Yeah, to the residential properties.
Neil?
The Serpentine facility has about 5,000 pigs on site, and there's 2 houses 400 metres from the piggery, and there's another one 700 metres from the piggery.
Thank you. And do those piggeries keep all of the animals within a shed also, or are they allowed to roam outdoors?
No, they're all in shed.
They're all in shed. So that's across all your facilities. They're all housed indoors within the shed.
With the exception of Mount Barker property, which is a free-range facility.
Oh, that's fitting. And I wanted to ask about the breakdown of the waste. So if it's not anaerobic breakdown, how is the waste broken down?
So we've modelled this on AI centres in South Australia and Victoria. It's sawdust bed, and it's cleaned out on a periodic basis.
And I think I saw in the report that it'll be removed every, is it 6 weeks or something that the waste will be removed?
There's 3 every 18 weeks, but there's some, because there's different rows, it's on a 6-week cycle. There's rows on it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Councillors, can you please refer to page 483? The question I've got is the noise forecasting and the assumptions being utilised. When temperature is at 20 degrees, wind speed is at 4 metres per second, relative humidity is 50%, ground absorb is 0.65. Now my question is, Bullsbrook's average is nowhere near 20 degrees in regards to temperature, like there's only 4 months in the year that it's 20 degrees. Can you explain why you use that as the assumptions for the noise forecasting, please?
I can't myself. I'm not sure if the gentleman can. It's probably a standard requirement that you have to do in the reporting, but I'm not sure myself.
We reverted to an acoustics expert on the matter, and that was the determination, so I'm not exactly sure how he got to that. But we've recently done a noise study at Pinjarra, and when we acquired the site, there was a gentleman there that was complaining every day to the DWER on noise, and he was assigning the responsibility to the piggery. He had 2,700 metres from the fan. There's 27 fans pointing his direction. Complaining mainly at night. We did the acoustic studies. The decibel reading in his house was 2 to 3 dB. It didn't vary the time of the day. The one study was done for about a 10-day window. And that's below reportable or hearing levels here. So it was the complainant, it was proven that the noise was not coming from the piggery.
Thank you. If there's any more questions for you to answer, I'll ask if one of the officers can give you a microphone, because some councillors are having trouble hearing your soft voice.
Sorry.
Can I have a follow-on question?
Yeah, just wait till we get a microphone.
Thank you.
Follow-up question, Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Second question is page 480 for councillors, is that the pig squeal is a short duration of 1 minute as well. Can we please have further explanation on that assumption too, please?
I can't provide it. That's done by the acoustic expert. We'd have to pass those questions on to him.
So following on again, Mr Deputy Mayor, if you don't mind, the Pinjarra study that was previously stated by the gentleman over there, were they the same assumptions being provided to council right now as well? What I'm trying to get at is the consistency of what is being provided and whether they. The question is it this is the same consistent model that's been provided to us as well throughout other studies? And also the fact that my question is, why are you using assumptions that do not align with what Bullsbrook actually is showing as well? Like the degrees, the pig squeals, like these are, it feels very generic. I don't know why. Can you get us some further information in regards to that, please? That'd be much appreciated.
Sure, we'll be able to answer the questions, yes.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Johnson first.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Yeah, my questions really relate a little bit to the facility itself. Why this location? Why Bullsbrook? No. No.
Let me come up to the stand.
Our operations are scattered from Mount Barker through from Mount Barker right through to Mora. Mora is going to be our next large commercial development, and we have a DA. So we were looking for a facility that is close to a logistics, close to a labour resource that we can then use as a distribution network to accommodate all our farms. And this facility, Westport doesn't only process semen for its own purposes, it also processes semen for the broader industry and proximity to other farms in other commercial operators.
And if I follow on, if I can, so the footprint on the site is relatively small. Is that you've got a large site with a relatively small facility on it? Is that intentional to provide a buffer?
It was the block that, when we were looking in the area, it was the block that was available. Okay. We don't need a large space for bores. This facility is what it is. There's enough semen capacity in this to supply the whole state's volumes, so it's not going to suddenly magnify in any great scope.
And I guess the question, if it's supplying the whole state, could it be located somewhere where it's likely to attract less offence from the local community?
Piggeries are contentious in whatever community. It doesn't matter whether I'm in Mora or Narrabeen or Serpentine, Pinjarra. That's the nature of piggeries. It's about, for me, finding locations that suit me and then getting the science behind the application to make sure that it doesn't create the offence that the people are concerned about.
The other question I've got is, as I don't know much about piggeries and boar artificial insemination centres, how long do the boars actually spend in this facility? So what's their life in there?
Approximately 2.5 years.
Thank you. They never go outside?
No. The model code is, we believe the model code will be amended to 6 square metres per boar. You can keep boars in stalls, but we've modelled this on 6 square metres per pen.
Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm interested in African swine flu and whether this location is more susceptible to, if there was a breakout of African swine flu, does that become a likely site that it would be transferred to, being close to a metropolitan area?
There's feral pigs scattered throughout the regions. We've got a program up at our Gingin sites whereby we working with the local, what's the group called? There's a local trapper, and we're actively trapping pigs around the area. And the benefit to the farmers is they're eradicating pigs from destroying crops. The benefit to us is it reduces the pig population closer to our facilities. And we're looking to partner with a guy down in the Mount Barker region about doing something similar. So from an ASF point of view, the issues are alive throughout the state. It doesn't matter where it's located.
And just to follow up, Mr Deputy Mayor, you're not transporting a lot of feed in there. I wonder, how far are you transporting the feed, or where do you get it from?
We currently get all our feed from either Westfeeds or Ingham's. That's our current supply.
And how far away is that from the current site?
Wanneroo and Bentley.
Okay. And is there any plan to further develop the site so that you have some sort of feed processing on the site at all? Or Is that completely ruled out?
Westpork's, this property is owned jointly by Westpork, and if you look at the ownership structure, it's Westpork and Thompson and Redwood. Thompson and Redwood are still going through a SAT appealer process in terms of the feed mill, as I understand it.
And it's your understanding that you could accommodate both, potentially? There's room enough as far as you see it?
Yes, and both parties, when we purchased the property, understood what the other party was looking to do. Yeah.
Okay. And just on that point, you mentioned yourself that piggeries are contentious, no matter where they are, but surely that this is fairly close to an urban environment. I gather that the other piggeries are the ones that don't get any complaints are way away from urban settlement. Is that correct? The ones that do get complaints are near houses. The ones that are further away don't get any, I would imagine. Is that correct?
Let's use our Serpentine facility. We've owned that for about 5 years now. 2 properties within 400 metres, another gentleman with 700 metres, and we've not had an odour complaint from any of those 3 farms. If I take the Pinjarra facility, when we acquired that was Pinjarra and Kojonup. When we acquired that, one was under a closure notice from the DWER, and the other one was about to be issued, and it was to do with effluent management and pond management. I would contend that the Pinjarra site and Kojonup sites are in more rural areas, more isolated areas, but they had significantly more odour complaints than the one at Serpentine. So I think a large part is management.
Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thanks very much. I just wondered, the Serpentine facility, or actually any of the facilities, had any noise complaints?
Only the Pinjarra one.
Pinjarra one, yep.
And that was attributed. The gentleman never complained about the pigs squealing, never complained once about the pig squealing. It was only about the fan noise. Yep.
Okay, and how far was he from that?
He was 700 metres in direct line of the fans, and there was an effluent pond or a water course that would potentially bounce water across.
So these other facilities, do you have sows there or bores?
At Pinjarra, we have 3 facilities that have both, and then we have some other facilities that just have grower facilities, the grower pigs.
Okay, but do you have another facility like this where you've got 200 bores in one building? That's got 200.
Pinjarra would have 200 bores, yep.
200 bores, not the other 2 though.
Serpentine would be about 50 bores and 2,500 sows. Kojonup our other side at Kojonup would have probably 60 bores and 2,800 sows.
Okay, all right. Yep. That's good, thanks.
Councillor Kiley.
And just to follow up, just in relation to the fans, are they operating to cool the pigs or heat them or both? Do they operate through the winter months?
It's an evaporative cooler essentially. It's like a chicken shed. It's a controlled environment shed. So in the peak of summer you've got all your fans running, and in the middle of winter you've got one fan ticking over on minimum vent just to maintain air flow or air quality in the shed. So yes. Yep.
Any other questions, councillors?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Henderson.
In regard to the servicing of this facility for Western Australia, it covers the whole state, is that right? Or just specific a local area?
So, no, whole state.
It's the whole state. Do you go interstate as well, or do you have quarantine issues there?
We don't normally go interstate, but it has been done once or twice from time to time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, and no other questions from councillors. If you have any other questions which haven't been answered tonight, or you think of anything, if you can contact the staff, and the staff will contact the applicants to get those questions back. Thank you for your time, gentlemen. And now there's questions of staff, and Councillor Henderson, you were first.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. To probably Mr. Russell, In view of the, I understand there's clearly a different use from the other application on the site. Where's he gone? Oh well, maybe it's going to be now. In view of the fact that the local general rural zone is being considered in respect of another application on the site, do we have a similar circumstance here that a use is being undertaken in a general rural site that's effectively servicing a much wider area?
Did you hear the question, Mr. Russell?
I'm sure he understands the context that I'm coming from.
Thank you.
I understood the question to be about the appropriateness of the use in the general rural zone and whether it has a local context. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. The objectives of the general rural zone are to provide for the economic base of the region. Now, the term region isn't defined necessarily within the scheme. I think what we've heard here is that as a statewide facility that will provide boar semen for the production of pigs across the state, it, in theory, has a relationship with providing for the local context of any potential piggeries within the city of Swan, as well as the broader region northwards into Amew Shade, Chittering and beyond, as well as anywhere else within the state. So the qualifications with that, however, is that obviously it's not to prejudice rural amenity, but we're satisfied within the context that as a productive agricultural use, and it's an animal husbandry facility, that its animal husbandry facilities are commonly found, as you would expect, within rural areas, and particularly the general rural zone is traditionally a broadacre agricultural area. It's not rural residential where there's a lifestyle component. General rural areas is where we find our productive agricultural production, both in Swan and you'll probably find elsewhere in other local authorities in WA as well.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Kiley.
Thank you. I'm just trying to determine the nearest zoned urban deferred land. How far would that possibly be? I can't really tell from the maps.
Through Mr Deputy Mayor, you'll find probably the closest is the Bullsbrook town site and the land south of that, which is over the other side of the highway, that would be the closest, I believe, urban zoned or urban deferred area.
And how far roughly would that be, do you think?
Oh, well beyond a kilometre or several kilometres.
Perhaps you could confirm that before next week's meeting,
Yep, I can,
Russell.
Mr Deputy Mayor, sure.
One more question, if I may, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Are you finished, Councillor Kiley? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. So what concerns me is the 2 kilometre radius for sensitive land uses and the implications that may have, not only now but in the future, potentially to residential and others. And a bit like chicken farms, the effective exclusion zone that gets created, a 4 kilometre diameter impact on the value of the land as a result. So how do we deal with that?
Through Mr Deputy Mayor, I think it's important to understand these instruments, and the 2 kilometre is a nominal guideline. You'll see in the report that there are various and multiple guidance regimes around separation distances from facilities such as this to surrounding sensitive receivers. Now, if the question is that you might accept the proposition of this facility in an area, if the question is would that necessarily prejudice the potential rezoning into the future of some surrounding land for urban, that, with all due respect, is a crystal ball gazing exercise. We can't assume or forecast into the future that perhaps somewhere proximate to this facility, if it was be approved, that you might be jeopardising the land being zoned to urban. I think The framework at the moment is this is a general rural zone. It is in a rural area under the Metropolitan Region scheme. It is not in an area that is contemplated, nor is it contemplated in the framework for the next 30 years for the land to go to urban. So I think we can comfortably say dealing with the here and now is what the planning framework would require. It would be very hard to speculate and prejudice a determination based on the notion that you might be jeopardising somewhere in the next 30 years the potential for land to go to urban. We don't quite look that far ahead in terms of the planning framework. It's the here and now, and there's nothing in the framework that this would potentially prejudice in terms of a rezoning.
Any other questions, councillors? Being no other questions, I thank all the deputies for their time tonight, for the information provided, and also to the city staff. And if we could recall the Mayor and Councillor McCulloch, we'll move on to the next item. Thank you, everyone. What's 4 metres a second in?
Thank you, councillors. Now we'll move on to the next item, which is item 4.6, the Civil Works site remediation at Lot 134, number 133, Clayton Street, Bellevue. And we have Mr Mark Richards from the Bellevue Ratepayers and Residents Association speaking against the recommendation. Welcome, Mr Richards. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mayor, councillors, staff and small gallery. We are not against the Bellevue Residents and Ratepayers Association, BRA, are not against remediating the site. However, we have strong concerns about the health risks to our community as a result of this remediation. We have attempted to liaise with city staff to obtain more information in order to conduct an informed conversation with the city. However, as we were advised, the information we requested would be subject to a freedom of information request via the city. We contacted the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation, DEWA, directly. Contrary to the report provided to Council for tonight's briefing, DEWA has informed us they have not officially given their advice and have no advice on record to the City of Swan or to the City, as they are waiting further reports from the City before being able to provide any advice. DEWA has been advised by the City that this DA will not be progressed by the City until the City has received advice from DEWA. In fact, DEWA are themselves unsure as to the progress of this DA. Given the advice from DEWA and taken into account that pending further information to the content of this site is unknown, we request that the Council defer this decision until such time as 1. DEWA is provided with the information they have requested. 2. DEWA has provided their advice. 3. BRA has been provided with a copy of the above. And 4. BRA is provided with a remediation risk management plan approved by the City of Swan Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Richards. Any questions, councillors?
Of staff.
Okay, well, we're going to have a Q&A at the end, councillor, so we can get stuck into an end. Thank you, Mr Richards. Appreciate your time. It takes us item 4.7, the proposed childcare premise at lot 490 and 491, number 7 Norman Street, Bellevue, and Miss Diane Aravino from the BRA.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. The BRA welcomes developments that enhance amenity of residents and complies with council-adopted Bellevue East land use study, and this one does not. The residential amenity of people in Blackburn and Norman Streets would be sacrificed for a developer of a daycare centre so he can make money. And let's be clear here, daycare centres are a commercial, profit-making business. The social demographics and number of children in Bellevue does not support a further centre, meaning clients will come from other areas at the cost of the Bellevue residents. There is already a new daycare centre apparently approved in the new Bunnings complex, so why would we need another? The closest daycare is not to capacity, and the daycare alongside Clayton View Primary School does not do all-day daycare because there was no demand due to social demographics. So the statistics provided by the developer needs qualifying. It is a side street, only accessible with one exit, will be open 6 days a week from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m, 300 new traffic movements in addition to the ones already from shops on Great Eastern Highway, as anybody who wants to turn right on Great Eastern Highway needs to go down Norman Street and Blackburn Street, then Horace Street to the lights to turn right. So these residents already have traffic impact, and this will be in addition. Additionally, noise from car doors, the 70 car doors closing from 7 a.m, then opening again later in the day. Of course, this will impact residential amenity. This DA was not assessed against Bellis, and why not? When I asked the officer looking after this DA, he said that he had actually heard of Bellis and would look it up. This is not good enough. It is a policy adopted by council to guide development in Bellevue. What is the point of spending over $100,000 on this policy when staff don't know about it or ignore it? Bellis was of so little importance to the officer that it was not even mentioned in the summary of objections. So to summarise, we believe this development application is opportunistic, with the purchase of a property that was on the market in a side access street, rather than identifying a location where the proposal will have the least impact on residents' lives and the least traffic impact, and that would enhance the suburb. Bellevue East Land Use Study was not referred to, which guides planning in Bellevue. Council should reject the proposal on grounds that it is inappropriate in this particular residential area, does not comply with many guidelines in Planning Bulletin 72-2009 for daycare centres, or TPS 17.4.2.7e. Residents are entitled to the basic right of quiet enjoyment of their properties, which this DA will destroy if approved, therefore should be rejected and the land remain residential zoned. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Aravino. Any questions of Ms Aravino, councillors? Thank you, Ms Aravino. I appreciate your time. Our next deputation is on item 4.8, the retrospective application for a brushwood fence at lot 15, number 36, Maxwell Road, Caversham. And we have one presenter here is Mr Ricardo Colley, the applicant in support of the reputation. Thank you, Mr. Colley.
Mr. Mayor, I've declared a financial interest. I'll be leaving the chamber.
Okay, if you just hold 2 seconds while the Deputy Mayor leaves. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Colley.
My name is Ricardo Colley from Caversham, and I'm here to speak on item 4.8, retrospective screen at number 36, Maxwell Road, Caversham. I thank the administration for the approval recommendation. However, I have concern with the proposed condition to limit the term of approval to a period of 2 years prior to requiring reapplication for further approval. The Council, at its meeting on the 13th of December 2017, considered an application for a single house at the adjoining property, number 30, Maxwell Road, Caversham. The application proposed a reduced lot boundary setback to our southern boundary, and we made a submission outlining our concern with the reduced setback and potential impact on our amenity as a result of the location of the outdoor living area and the proximity of this to our boundary. Council approved the application with a condition requiring submission of landscape plan for the area between the pool deck and the northern side boundary, presumably in response to our concerns regarding privacy. Unfortunately, the conditions did not specify the size and maturity of the required planting, and the planting installed was less than 1 metre high and did not provide any screening to the pool deck area or privacy for our property. At the time of the approval, we spent $8,800 on 8 mature magnolia trees, 2 metres high at purchase, as can be seen in attachment 3. These proved insufficient to protect our amenity once the dwelling was complete and occupied. We then made the decision to spend $10,000 installing the screen, which is subject of this application. We chose material that blended in with the rural surroundings and is considered far more appropriate than alternative solid materials such as Colorbond or brick, and installed this only to the extent of the affected area. It should be noted that this selection of material was deemed appropriate by the Swan Valley Planning Committee, who recommended to the City of Swan that the fencing be approved as the application was consistent with the planning objectives for the area as listed in the Swan Valley Planning Act 1995. We have incurred considerable cost installing the screen as a result of the reduced setback of the adjoining property. We do not consider that the landscaping installed in the adjoining property has been appropriately selected to provide a suitable replacement to the screen in only a 2-year period. The conditions of this approval are dependent on the adjoining property maintaining their landscaping to a level that would provide equal or greater screening than the installed screen. It is not reasonable for our application to be dependent on the actions of another property that is not subject of this application. Regarding concerns raised in relation to vines and proximity to the fence, there are only 4 vines that align with the screen. Given this row of vines lies on the boundary, in the unlikely event that issues do arise, then we as owners are happy to remove these 4 vines at our own cost. We respectfully request that Council resolve to approve the brushwood fence consistent with option 1 of the officer's report. The implications of this decision means that not only is the development lawful, but the development would provide increased privacy to our property, which has been significantly impacted as a result of the reduced setback of the adjoining property and insufficient planting installed.
Thank you, Mr. Colley. Any questions of Mr. Colley, councillors? Thank you, Mr. Colley. Appreciate your time. Sorry, wait, there is one. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Colley. The western end 2 and a bit panels that partly shade the vines, from your house, if those panels weren't there, could you still see? I'm sorry. Could you still see the neighbouring house?
Yes.
From the house.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions of Mr. Colley? Thank you, Mr. Colley. We appreciate your time. That takes us down to item 5.2, which is the Woolcott Avenue upgrade, and Mr. Eric Purvis speaking against the recommendation. And you can recall the Deputy Mayor, please. Thank you. So, councillors, so you're aware, Mr. Purvis consolidated a number of other deputations tonight, so I've granted him an extra 2 minutes. So thank you, Mr. Purvis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor and councillors and staff, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this matter. I would like to first of all commend the officers for listening to the residents' wishes and suggesting basically that you leave the damn road alone, which is a good idea, and we also concur with that. However, something that I'd like to draw your attention to is that in the key issues part of their note, they refer to projected increase in vehicles of approximately 9,000 vehicles per day. 9,000 vehicles per day is by no means acceptable by any measure, especially in a rural setting when traffic will end up at the intersection of West Swan Road and Woolcott Avenue. The new residents of Brabham are not experienced with driving on the rural roads, and that's evidenced by the number of those that can't drive without a white line to show them what side of the left road of the road is. It's not a criticism, it's just a fact. A lot of those people are city people, and they just can't drive on a road without a white line down the middle. They also can't drive down the road without high beam on and enough spotlights to start a small scrub fire, regardless of whether there's oncoming traffic or not. So imagine you have 9,000 vehicles a day driven by people who aren't that experienced with it, and they're all trying to get out of West Swan Road and Woolcott Road intersection, which is going to be a death trap. So I very much doubt that too many will survive that ordeal. So, as I say, it's with the utmost respect that I suggest that it is somewhat irresponsible to even consider that that's a good plan. Council has stated clearly in writing that it has no plans to upgrade the Woolcott Road and West Swan Road intersection, and I might add we as residents concur with that. There is certainly no need to upgrade that corner or Woolcott Avenue at all, and dare I say it would be safer for all concerned to close off Woolcott Avenue just west of Murray Road, as we have stated many times in the past. I would further suggest that Council goes one more sensible logical step, and it's safer and cheaper and has much more benefit to all residents to close it off. It saves our environment, our wildlife and our sanity. It also saves lives, as previously outlined. So, if you close it off, you do not need to do any minor upgrades at all on the surface because it's more than adequate for the local traffic, as the volumes will drop substantially. There's no need for a bike path either, as once these are closed, the road goes pretty well to nowhere and the bike path becomes redundant. So that's more money saved, which can be used elsewhere and give greater community benefit somewhere else. The bike path footpath was only requested in the submissions from other residents. There's 2 neutral and 2 in support of the upgrade. And both of those, all of those 4 submissions, stated that they would like a footpath or a bike path. And the reason they stated that is because it's too damn dangerous to walk or ride your push bike down Walcott Avenue with 2,500 cars a day going past you. Imagine what it would be like with 9,000. So, again, it's a good idea to close it off completely. The state government's created the problem with their urban strip up through Brabham, etc. So, it might be worth going back to main roads and suggesting that they modify Drumpellier at the Walcott west end, the western end of Walcott, and connect it to Drumpellier with a left turn only filter. That will take care of most of the problem. It's a logical way for the urban traffic to flow as the road is designed for that volume. Now, at this point, I crave a little indulgence. If you wouldn't mind, councillors, just bear with me a second and maybe just close your eyes and imagine this story. Imagine you're sitting at home and you see a police car pull into your driveway. A solemn-looking officer alights from his vehicle and walks to your door and knocks. You answer. He asks if you can come in and sit down. He then asks if you have someone at home with you. You start to get a little concerned here and you tell him that you're waiting for, insert your significant other, son, daughter, child, wife, husband, to come home. He says that's what he wants to talk to you about. He then tells you about a terrible road crash at the corner of West Swan Road and Walcott Avenue that resulted in a fatality. Sadly, that fatality was your loved one. Now imagine how you good people would feel here if you've got the chance now to close off Walcott Avenue and those 9,000 vehicles a day don't pass through West Swan Road and Walcott Avenue intersection, so that no other family member has to hear those words from that officer. And I know how that feels like because I've had that conversation. Now, you have the power to make sure that that does not happen to someone else. Please accept the officer's recommendation, but do not upgrade Walcott Avenue at all, but go further. Close it off, do not upgrade the surface at all, and don't waste the money on a bike path. As a rural road, it isn't needed. And you do have the power to do it, because I have a letter here from Rita Safiotti that states, as you're aware, Walcott Avenue is a local road under the care responsibility of the City of Swan. Therefore, any works to this road, including design, management and delivery of any road construction works, is the responsibility of the City. While Main Road has some responsibilities, like installation and maintenance of permanent signs, the City is ultimately responsible for the operation of its road network, including upgrade projects and construction works. It then goes on to talk about the flora and fauna and etc. So you do have the power. You have the power to shut it off, you have the power to save lives, and you certainly have the power to save an awful lot of money and spend it elsewhere where it's needed. It'll certainly save a lot of wildlife and a lot of trees. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr Purvis. Well done. Any questions of Mr Purvis? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr Purvis. Can you tell me, in recent times with the increased traffic flow, have you seen or noticed any increased number of deaths of kangaroos and wildlife on that road? Because I know the local community does have quite a significant roo population.
Yeah, it does. I suppose it's probably a result of two things. Obviously, the urbanisation at the Brabham end, which has reduced a lot of their habitat, so they tend to gravitate more down towards the West Swan Road where it's still rural open land. There's a lot more of them, they're in a lot tighter space, and then there's a lot more cars as well. And as I've said before, sadly, a lot of the people that drive up and down there from Brabham, and I don't mean to discriminate, but it's a fact, a lot of them aren't used to it, so they still tend to hook along there at their 80, 90 kilometres an hour in the middle of the night, and even though they've got enough lights on their car to start a small scrub fire, kangaroos don't care about that. They tend to hop out in front of traffic lights and high beams. So, yeah, we've seen a lot more dead roos on the side of the road, some unfortunately with young, and a lot of young roos as well. And it's quite sad. So, yeah, we're seeing a lot more of it. I should imagine the council would be aware of that because they'd be going around picking up the carcasses, I would have thought. But just my thoughts. Anything else?
Any further questions of Mr Purvis? No. Thank you, Mr Purvis.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
And be careful out left and right on that road too, by the way.
Oh, tell me about it.
Okay, councillors, that's... oh no, we've got one more. Sally's written one, that's cool. Okay, thanks councillors, that takes care of the deputation. We'll now go into presentation from staff. And first up is the Manager of Statutory Planning, Mr Russell, and I have a question from Councillor Johnson, if I recall, on 4.6.
Yeah.
He's got a question to get out of.
4.6, yeah, the question, I guess this is the chance we do these questions out of order, that it takes a while to work out what the question was. Yeah, Mr Russell, have we actually received a letter then or a communication from DWER to support the report?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the report indicates that we have. What I will do subsequent to the contentions made this evening is secure a copy of the correspondence and provide that for the benefit of the councillors tomorrow morning.
Councillor Kelano.
Oh, thank you. What was that site? We're talking about the Bellevue, Clayton Street, Bellevue contaminated site remediation item. 4.6. Okay. So what was that actually used for previously, for it to be in this state?
Well, the site, this piece of land and the adjoining land to the west have a history of previously being used for the disposal of building rubble. Some of the land further to the east, there was anecdotal evidence years ago of it being used for the disposal of animal carcasses. Some of that land also, this is not necessarily this lot, but the land to the east adjoining it, that had also been used for some legitimate approved disposal of tyres. So these proponents here, this land is general industrial and it had been used, I think, as a car storage area by Hughes, Mr Hughes. So the proponents here are obviously looking to, I suppose, investigate and potentially remediate for the prospect of a future use, which is, at this point, the land is industrial, so the uses would only be in line with the industrial zoning under the scheme, but that's the purpose.
Okay, now Mr Russell, is there any item that you wish to present to us in particular?
Only, if I could, Mr Mayor, to commend to the Council the urgency of items 4.1 and 4.2, which are our development contribution plans for both the South Bullsbrook Industrial Area and the Bullsbrook Town Site. Mr Mayor, some of this work has been some of the most important done in the division, the planning division, and not just the planning division, the assets division and the finance division. And they go to the heart of providing shared infrastructure, and also they go to the heart of arrangements for the upgrade of Stock Road. I know you've had some submissions this evening. All I can say, Mr Mayor, around that is these are the same issues that have been presented back and forth between proponents and city staff for half a decade. Without making light of the importance of the other items, they're on the front of the agenda for a reason. They are extremely significant to the future development of the Bullsbrook, both the Bullsbrook Town Site and the South Bullsbrook Industrial Area, and the deployment of critical infrastructure. And I'm happy to take any questions on that, but I assume in the absence of questions that Council doesn't have any particular issues with the items.
Okay. Councillor Catalano?
Yeah, I've got a few questions actually. I noticed in the submissions that there were a number of smaller landowners who were saying that they couldn't basically afford it. Because if my calculations are correct, we're basically talking about $50 per square metre, roughly for the more expensive precincts in both of these DCPs, and then you know, something like $30 or $40 a square metre for the less expensive parts of the precincts in these developer contributions. So, you know, there's seems it is quite a lot of money for a small landowner that perhaps doesn't want to move. So the question is, what happens if they can't pay? And, well, first of all, do they have to pay? And by what date do they have to pay if they have to? And if they don't have to pay, what happens about that property in terms of the DCP?
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm not sure whether we're referring to the town site residential DCP or the industrial one, but irrespective, the simple fact is this, is that no landowner pays anything unless they undertake development or subdivision that gives rise to the need for the infrastructure. So in the case of the South Bullsbrook industrial area, where we have some landowners, small landowners that are there, the cost per hectare and extrapolated down to per square metre only arises to them if they choose to develop or subdivide in a manner that gives rise to the need for the infrastructure in the DCP. They pay nothing, Mr Mayor, not a cent, if they don't undertake any development. If they're living on the land, and the South Bullsbrook industry, we have people that have been living on it when it was previously rural and enjoying a normal rural lifestyle with a house, they pay nothing. And they will pay nothing forever and will never be liable to pay anything unless they develop it. Now, in the common instance, what you will find, these landowners that hold this land, that we've got to remember, Mr Mayor, the people that are sitting on rural land that had the benefit of the state rezoning it to industrial have got a defrayed windfall that is only about that will be realised the point in which someone offers them a sum, which will probably be a sum in excess of what they paid for it as a rural land holding. They will have a windfall. These landowners invariably never develop the land for the purpose of an industrial estate. They will sell it to someone else, and the capacity, I think, to realise a sale will depend on a developer and the industry seeing that there is a DCP and knowing for certain what they're liable for. With certainty comes the prospect of development and the prospect of people making offers on these sorts of landowners for the purchase of their land. They will invariably never put their hand in their pocket to pay for anything because they're not in the market necessarily to developing a major industrial facility or transport logistics operation. So they won't have to pay anything. They can sit there for as long as they like, enjoying the lifestyle they have, invariably until, of course, the area develops around them and they decide or are made an offer at that point in which they will sell and move somewhere else.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. Through you to the CEO or Mr Russell. If this isn't adopted next week, the likely implications on the Stock Road construction and the $15 million federal grant that is in play. Thank you.
Mr Russell. But this is the third time this has been to Council. Council has approved it twice before. The other three times due to objections raised by the landowners about the costs. We've been required to go back and revisit the way in which the costs have been distributed. And this is the third time, and where we could be reaching a stage if we don't move forward on this, that the $14.5 million contribution coming from the federal government will be lost. And then, by the way, the costs that these people are imposed upon them, I cannot see Council being in a position to fund that $14.5 million. It'll be a DCP cost. The cost will be even higher. It's in Council's interest. It's in the groups of these people, in their interest to make sure that this is approved and moves forward, because $14.5 million is coming from the federal government.
Councillor Kelano.
Sorry, what was the cost then for the Stock Road in total? And how much of that's coming from state government? 44, is it? And state government putting anything in?
No.
No, not at this stage, no.
So basically 30 million's coming from the City of Swan?
DCP.
Oh, from the, from the DCP.
Correct.
But will that money actually come in? So the DCP comes in first and then Stock Road's built, or is Stock Road built and then the DCP money comes in? Which way is that going to work?
CEO? Mr. Russell?
I'm happy to answer that, Mr. Mayor. Well, look, as I understand my colleague, the city's already committed to constructing Stock Road. So we'll get, and as I understand, part of the precondition in getting the grant is that we have a matching funding mechanism, which is the DCP. So if we go ahead and do the upgrade of Stock Road, we'll invariably be getting contributions beyond what the federal government has granted to us. We'll be getting that as and when development comes in. So we'll be pre-funding it and getting the money back through as and when land is developed and contribution liabilities under the DCP if it's gazetted full due.
Any further questions, Mr. Russell? Yep.
One, thanks then. So just getting back to that one then. So when do you think the first lot of these DCPs are likely to come in that are going to pay for this $30 million that we're going to actually put into this building of Stock Road? What do you anticipate?
Well, some has already come in because that's come in from the residential development in Bullsbrook itself. They've now been required to contribute.
From my understanding of these documents, though, it is actually 169 that's actually contributing the most to Stock Road, which is not that one at all.
Correct. So there's two, 169 and 170.
Yeah, 169 is likely to start bringing back some, contributions to that 30 million that the city's going to be putting into this Stock Road upgrade. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can advise that Harvest Serona Capital, who the major interested party in the South Bullsbrook Industrial, and they had land that was in the precinct to the eastern side of Allenbrook, next to the highway, and then subsequently transferred their purchase or interest to the western precinct. They already have and have had in for some time with the West Australian Planning Commission a subdivision application for effectively 1/3 of the entire South Bullsbrook Industrial area, and that is pending. So if this DCP is adopted by the council next week, and it goes to our friends at the Department of Planning, and staff have already been very upfront in bringing it to their attention to hopefully expedite a swift processing by the department staff to make a recommendation to the minister, you will have a DCP that could conceivably be in legal effect before or shortly after a subdivision approval is issued for Harvest Serona. They come to get a clearance on that, they are liable, and that's a large land holding. And that we could calculate the amount that would be, but it would be imminent if they act on that subdivision approval.
Okay. As we run down the list, councillors, Mr. Russell has a number there. Any questions of any other items of Mr. Russell? Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question actually is about 4.5, Mr. Mayor. I've got your name against this as having an interest in it. So, okay, I'll carry on. My question, Mr. Russell, is I understand seeing somewhere once in a city brochure that the city...
Councillor Johnson, what we might do is, Councillor McCulloch and I, if you just got a couple of questions, we'll leave the room for this one.
Yeah, that was my point, yeah.
Councillor McCulloch.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, thank you.
If you just wait for both councillors to leave the chambers, and you can ask your question. Thanks, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I was trying to be helpful earlier on. Question is, I've seen in city brochures that the City of Swan is a humane food region. Does anybody else recall that? I mean, can you recall seeing that? So I'm interested to know, I think we're all familiar with that marketing concept. I guess the question is, does that apply up in Bullsbrook? And is applying that as a concept or a policy? I don't know whether it's a policy or whether it's just a marketing slogan. Is that something that is relevant to deciding this application?
Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through the Deputy Mayor, the city is no longer part of the Humane Food campaign, and those signs have been taken down, and it applied mostly to the Swan Valley.
Thank you.
Further question, Councillor Johnson? Councillor Catalano, do you have a question on this same item?
No, sorry.
Any other questions on this item?
Only that I'll be considering moving an alternate recommendation on 4.5.
Thank you. We can on this item, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, just a further question on this one. With we heard the proponent talking about the fact there is such a thing as a free-range artificial insemination centre, and is it a reasonable planning condition, a reasonable thing for us to do to say that we feel that this kind of facility in this day and age is not appropriate, and that a free-range facility is more appropriate? Can we reject it on those grounds?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I didn't take it that the proponents indicated that their facility or piggery down in Mount Barker being free range was actually a facility, a breeding facility. I could be wrong about that, but you've got to determine either approve or refuse the application as it's submitted. If you're contemplating whether or not you can prefer a different type of application in preference to this, you need to express a decision in terms of a fault on relevant planning terms with the application as it's submitted.
If we say that it's inhumane, is that it's a subjective term? If we say, can we say it's an inhumane use, and therefore is that a planning ground?
It would not be legally inhumane. You might be deriving such a term in a philosophical bent. I don't believe that would be sustained in a court. Unless they're violating some law in terms of cruelty to animals, that this is an industry-regulated facility and they're following best practice, it would just be a purely philosophical point to decide that breeding animals for consumption is inhumane. It would be a philosophical bent that I don't think would be sustained in a legal forum such as a State Administrative Tribunal.
Thank you very much.
And I suppose the only comment I could add to that, by housing the pigs or the boars outside, you're going to increase noise, pollution, and I had thought of one other thing that they're objecting to, odour. By containing it inside a large shed, you'd reduce much of those issues. So if there's no further questions on this agenda item, if I could ask the Mayor and Councillor McCulloch to be recalled to the chamber, please.
Alternate motion for Councillor Henderson on that item.
Okay, no worries. Okay. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. My next question is about the proposed childcare premises. And I was just trying to... Yeah, the question is, the report does not mention the Bellevue land use study, which the city did undertake some years ago, which I believe determined in the different parts of Bellevue what the appropriate future land use was. Does the Bellevue land use study have some application to this application? Should it be applied?
Through Mr. Mayor, from recollection, the gist of the Bella study was the promotion of enhanced residential environments within Bellevue and the winding back of industrial areas. So what we have here is a use that is permissible within a residential environment. Excuse me. So the question, I suppose, if the inference is whether or not having a facility that might pose the potential for emissions is contrary to ballast, well, I would say that application of ballast isn't relevant in this instance here. It's a permissible residential environment. We're not talking about a scheme amendment or a rezoning of the land. It's a use capable of approval within a residential environment. And if I reference the report, you'll also note that staff have reported that there is case law in the SAT to say that it is a natural attendant part of a residential environment to have a childcare facility. And I don't think there'd be too much argument to say in residential environments where people live and raise families and children, that there is an attendant need for a childcare facility. So if it was a case that it was inappropriate in a residential zone, you would find a scheme, or for example, Ballas would have been identifying this use and saying it should be an X use. My recollection is there was no such identification of Ballas with reference to childcare facilities. So you can make that inference, but I'm comfortable that there is no direct correlation or relevance of Ballas to this application, hence it's not referenced in the report, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. And if I can just go back, I can't go back. I can go back to 4.6, civil works site remediation. I'll be moving a deferment of that, Mr Mayor.
Mr Russell?
So you're moving a deferment on 4.6?
4.6, yeah, civil works site remediation.
You move a deferral on 4.6, okay. Councillor Parry, I think you were first, and Councillor Scanlon, you're next. Ladies first, is it? He is a gentleman after all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parry and Mr Mayor. Mr Russell, I'd just like to ask you about 4.7, the childcare centre on Norman Street. I notice there's quite a number of trees on the block surrounding the houses there at the moment. On the plans, I can't see any of those trees retained. Do you know if any of the trees will be retained?
Just bear with me, please, Mr Mayor. I'll
sorry to catch you off guard.
Plan.
Please wipe the way. Start of the report.
Through Mr. Mayor, I think you can see from the, I mean, if we're correlating the area with the site plan, you can see that the car parking area, most of the vegetation, as far as you can see from the aerial, is to the rear of the lot, and where the car parking is. So, look, I imagine whilst there is some retention of shrubs and trees to the Norman Street frontage, the vegetation to the rear that's in the car park would seem ostensibly to be removed. There is a tree there you can see. It is open, of course, to council with car parking areas. In fact, it's promoted to accommodate the design so that you might retain existing trees. If council's of the view, that can easily be accommodated.
Thank you, Mr Russell. And through Mr Mayor, one other question on
Yep.
that. So my other question, again on 4.7, is that I noticed in the report there's going to be, they've reduced the number of children to be 63 children at any one time, and to reduce the noise complaints for the nearby residents, they propose to limit the number of children playing outside at any one time. And I'm just wondering, is that normal for, as far as you know, for a childcare centre to limit the number of children playing outside so that they don't have noise complaints from the neighbours?
Through Mr Mayor, look, I think in order to comply with the noise regulations and reduce the volumes of outdoor noise, they've got to reduce the sources. A lot of these applications, we do look at understanding the operational arrangements that a proponent is having. It is possible to stagger, I suppose, outdoor playtimes amongst classes or age groups. It seems it's perfectly reasonable, and it's certainly doable. That's what would be required to ensure that the noise levels are not exceeding the noise regulations and then reasonably or unreasonably impacting the amenity of any surrounding residents who may be at home during the day when these children are outside.
Mm. And just to follow on to that quickly, is that the properties are quite near, the neighbours are quite nearby to this, and I wonder, would it not be, although I notice in the report that you concur with the statement by the previous determinant at SAT, I think it's the City of Melville, that childcare centres are suitable to be in residential areas. Is it suitable to be so close in proximity to neighbours that you have to limit the outdoor playtime of children? Would you consider that suitable?
Well, if In short, yes. We've got to deal with the application as it's submitted. I mean, most of the guidelines talk about having sites of suitable size to actually accommodate the requisite outdoor play areas. You'll often find that most of these residential lots, they're ordinary residential lots that someone might purchase and amalgamate, are going to have immediate neighbours. In this instance here, you've got a site with 2 street frontages, so council would be aware we've had other applications, of course, where you've got neighbours on multiple sides. So this might be a slightly better situated site than others if you're worried about sharing boundaries with neighbours. But the only thing that we're looking at there is that what the impact is in terms of noise levels and of course visual impact with buildings. The buildings aren't a problem here. The principal issue is the amount of noise. The applicant will need to noise attenuate. So it's again, if the site can be managed to address the issues of noise, then it's as good a site perhaps as anything else.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, just very quickly, you mentioned that the buildings are not an issue, but actually the existing buildings, one of those buildings has great social heritage value to the community of Bellevue. So I just wanted to correct you on the problem with the building, because the problems of the old building being demolished, there is an issue.
Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. For councillors, it's page 533. Just want to read a comment. There are 12 centres in regards to the childcare one, so 533. There are 12 centres within a 5K range. Out of the 12 centres, 2 of them are OSHC services, out of school hours. Yep, I know. And the total capacity of long day care services, 551. Total number of children of 0 to 4 year age group in surrounding suburbs, including Bellevue, is 1464 per the 2016 statistics. There is still a care requirement for 923 children, assuring this to be a viable service needed in this area. My question is this. I did a quick sum in regards to the surrounding suburbs, and I could only get under 900. And the second point is why, and the second point is, does the city staff believe that 100% of capacity of children between the 0 and 4 age group need childcare?
I don't know how you answer that.
Well, I'd love to answer that, councillor, but I can't. I don't think the staff can either. Sorry.
All I can say to that, Mr Mayor, is that these are proponents that are making a commercial venture. So if they're making a commercial venture, their business based on childcare, then I would expect they've looked at the demand in terms of the census statistics, in terms of what the numbers of children, and worked out what might be required. That, as the report says, is the onus is on them in terms of a proposal that might have a viable business. If it's not, well, of course, then the childcare centre may struggle. But it's not our concern to establish commercial demand in these types of applications.
Thank you.
Any councillors with further questions? Mr Russell. Councillor Congleton.
Yeah, 5.2, I can see. 5.2?
Yeah, that's Walcott Avenue.
Yeah, that's the next one.
Okay. Any...
Well, in regard to Mr Russell, I have one.
Yep, okay, yep.
Thank you. If we go to item 4.8, on the house on number 30 Maxwell, I'm sorry, Councillor Lucas, I should have forewarned you. On the number 30, was there a house there previously to the current house, and was it a double-storey house?
Through Mr Mayor, testing my memory here, the short answer was there was a house, and my strong recollection it was a double-storey house.
Correct.
Yes, certainly perhaps not as extensive as this one,
but it would have been higher than this one.
I wouldn't like to. I'd have to do a direct comparison in terms of the plans to work out whether the old house was higher than this one.
Okay, I just wanted to get a feel for that. And I did ask this evening about the view from the house on 36 to the property next door. Has most of the complaint have been about the pool area and the privacy aspects around that?
Mr Russell.
Through Mr Mayor, when the owners of number 30 lodged their development application for a house with a cantilevered pool. These applicants in this instance expressed concern with the fact that that elevated section was going to look across and to their house and their veranda area. So it may well be the actual design of the new house on number 30 opened up and was deliberately designed to have areas that obviously took natural advantage of the fine outlook across to the river and a pool deck area, and the concerns of these proponents were that people would spend more time out there. It's a nicer spot to spend time out, maybe entertain, etc., and that the neighbours, or these applicants, would then be looking across at groups of people, including their neighbours at their pool area. So that certainly was the concerns of this applicant with the house at number 30 when it was designed and advertised.
Okay, so the reasoning for the questioning is that I did ask about the 2.5 panels on the western end of the applicant, and it would seem that they are, from what you just said, it would seem that those panels are surplus to the needs of resolving that privacy issue.
Well, perhaps it's not for me to comment. It's probably a matter of fact, but I mean, you heard the proponents indicate that well, if you look at their house, but they've got their rear area of their house where they've got their garden. I've been to the site there. That might be inferring the visibility of the house at number 30 from areas behind their house that are still effectively their backyard.
Okay. I'll consider perhaps some alterations, not against, but just some alterations to the motion. Thank you.
You know, incidentally, both these people here are related. Both the neighbours here, the applicant and the next door neighbour, the objectors, are related? Yeah. Okay. A quick question, yep.
Sorry, just with the DCP, I don't understand which is the South Bullsbrook. Is it the 170 or the 169? Because it doesn't
169, Mr Mayor, is the South Bullsbrook Industrial DCP.
Oh, that's the whole thing in its entirety.
There's two DCPs. 170 is the Bullsbrook town site.
Yes, that's fine.
169 is the South Bullsbrook Industrial, that are directly abut Stock Road.
That's right, and it's got the 3 different precincts.
That's right.
The whole thing is called South Bullsbrook. Yes. And so 1/3 of that is going to be developed by one particular proponent.
They have control of 1/3 of all precinct 3, 1/3 of the approximately 1/3 of the South Bullsbrook Industrial area. That's right.
Oh, good. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further items to be withdrawn from Mr. Russell's stack there at this point in time?
So I will be withdrawing 4.7. My
4.7.
apologies, I forgot to mention that.
Okay, Councillor Colley.
Mayor, 4.5, I'll have option 2 with some further conditions.
Okay, thank you. No others?
I'll go for 4.5 as well, Mr Mayor.
You got another one there as well, 4.5. Okay, already had. You already in there earlier anyway. Okay, so that takes us down to the Executive Manager, Planning and Development, and Mr. Van der Linde. Is there anything you wish to speak us about specifically, or any questions of Mr. Van der Linde, councillors? Councillor C 1.4 will go into the confidential item, so be prepared for that. Any questions of Mr. Van der Linde? Mr. Van der Linde, any specific thing you wish to address us to on here?
Mr. Mayor, maybe the only thing that I'd like to emphasise is on item 3.2. If you look at the recommendation on page, what is it, 180...
185?
Yeah, on the recommendations on page 190, recommendations 4 and 5, just to emphasise that we're recommending that for all the petitions that we've received, requests for heritage assessments, that we combine all those requests and appoint a consultant to do the assessments in one go. And also that any further requests for ad hoc assessments in this financial year, we then leave over for the full review of the heritage of the heritage list in the next financial year. Otherwise, it's just from a operational point of view, we can't get going in actually getting the work done. So I just wanted to emphasise that in in the recommendation for you.
Okay, Councillor Scanlon, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to ask you about 13.4. So my query is regarding the time frame and priority project 2, which is the South Guildford link. I noticed that there's a developer contribution which we're hoping to use from the Rose Hill subdivision, Safe Active Streets. Is that still viable?
Mr. Mayor, I may defer to Mr. Coaten then. Just I'm not 100% clear in terms of the planning of that work, how far that have progressed.
I'd have to take that on notice. With a lot of the routes that are identified in the cycle plan, this is an informing document that informs council's future budgets and business plans. So the fact that it appears in here doesn't even mean that it's on our 10-year program.
Councillor Johnson, you had your hand up.
Oh yeah, my question was more about what's happened between the last time this came to council where we deferred it so that there could be some discussion with councillors. I think we had there was a South Guildford route and also a Jane Brook cycle path. I just wondered what happened because I don't recall getting contacted, and I think there were several councillors had an interest in this.
Mr. Mayor, there was a request just after the council meeting, I think it was on the 19th of August, an email went out to all councillors requesting, them identifying whether they're interested in meeting, and we've had responses from Councillor Scanlon, McNamara, Brodovnik, and one more councillor. So discussions outside of those meetings took place with those councillors, and with Councillor Scanlon specifically, it was followed up with a telephonic discussion as well. And apart from those formal discussions, we also had discussions about Water Street, I think was some crossings there. So in general, those discussions took place. There's some further discussion that probably will take place with the Balladura councillors.
So it's not been updated again at all. Then it's been changed.
There were no modifications required as a result of those discussions.
Okay, thanks. And just to clarify something, Councillor Congleton, you did withdraw this one, did you? Was it this one?
Indicated.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify Mr. Leon.
Mr. Leon.
My communication with staff in the point of view of this item was only on the item that we actually put forward in the motion here. And that was that this matter would be brought to the actual place area and the place for discussion. Full stop. Nothing else. I was not interested in going at any time to meet the staff from the point of view on a one-off situation. I never intended to, and I never actually stated I was doing it. So I didn't agree in any way. I stuck to whatever the motion that was put here on that particular night. And this matter was to be brought to the actual placement area for discussion. For the discussion of the situation that affected the individual places. And that was what the Balladura or the Whiteman board people were concerned. And that's what I was concerned about. So I just wanted to put it quite clear.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you.
I agree in any of the situations.
Okay. Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. With this bike path, the thing that's crossed my mind is, these bike paths are going to be built on the roads or actually on the footpath, or because what I'm really concerned about is actually we're going to lose a lot of trees because the bike path is going to require a lot of trees to be chopped down. So that hasn't been taken into account in this thing so far. So I think since we're going for the deferral, can we actually start thinking about that? Like, first of all, are trees going to be chopped down? How many? Do we need to do it? And what the cost of those trees, the loss of those trees, will be to the city in terms of, the environmental, but also the climate and all the other things that go with having, and I'm talking about mature trees now. So I think, if we're going to defer it, let's get it right, and let's actually not just look at bike paths, but
questions,
trees.
Councillor, because if you're going to defer it, you can discuss it during debate.
Yeah, no, but I'm just wondering can we get that put into the plan?
No, well, Council, I think you're missing the point here. This is a high-level document for you to determine whether you want a bicycle link between A and B. At the end of the day, it may go on one side of the road, it may go on the other side of the road. You may reduce the width of the road and put it in the middle of the road, but that's a detailed design consideration after Council has put in place money to go and build it or money for an investigation. So that's not the purpose of this report. Otherwise, if that's what you want, we better leave it. Don't do anything. Don't do any more work on any cycleways. I would have thought cycleways are necessary for people to enjoy the outside, make it safer for people to use the roads. So this is a very high-level document up here. It's not Mr Van der Leen's responsibility this time to go away and do that detailed work. That's the responsibility of Mr Coaten. So when Mr Coaten gets down to this and you say, yes, we want to have a look here, then you'll consider it. And then you'll make a decision and say, we want a cycleway from A to B. You can then say, if there's too many trees, we don't want it there, we won't do it. That's fine. That's the consideration. We can ever put it on road. It could be concrete, it could be asphalt, but this is a high-level document to go away and do some more planning work for the future.
Thank you, Mr CEO.
I just wanted to make clear then, so every time a little bit of this cycleway is progressed, I mean the high level doing now, but every time a little bit of this is progressed, is it going to come back to council?
Well,
I would have thought that was an operational thing then.
Well, it is, and that's where you make a design, a consideration the time you're putting it on the budget.
Any other questions
Sorry,
of Mr
excuse
Van der Leen?
me. I'm sorry, Mr Mayor, to interrupt. I've just realised, without noticing earlier, that I have a financial interest in 13.4 because I reside on Helena Street, and Helena Street is specifically mentioned in here. I've just noticed, so I'd like to put in a financial interest, please.
Righto. Are there any more questions on this item? There is. Proximity interest. Okay, Councillor Lucas.
Perhaps CEO or Mr Van der Leen could answer my question in relation to the cycle network plan. If we don't develop this plan, is this something we can use to seek future Bike West or state government funding for by having a plan ready to go, or without a plan we can't seek funding?
That's part of the consideration, Councillor, particularly some of them are on our advocacy list as well.
Mr Mayor, if I can add to that. So the plan is an overall plan. Obviously, to implement such a plan, it will have to happen over many years to come, and it will come at a huge cost to the city. So for that reason, what the purpose is to identify in the long term the main routes of the network. And then if you look on page 10 of the agenda, or sorry, 35 of the agenda, there's a whole hierarchy of routes. So that will determine to what level it is constructed. And then on page 39, you will see that in section 5, we've identified 10 priorities. So through the consultation, identified these will be the 10 priorities for the city to deal with first. So to assist Mr. Coaten's teams and where to start their detailed design. So those will be the 10 priorities that we'll work on first up, because we realise that obviously it comes at a huge cost, and that the planning for those 10 projects will then be available when we apply for funding.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Conk has indicated defer on that one. So we now move on to Executive Manager Operations, Mr. Coaten.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just make a few comments in relation to Walcott Avenue. There was a written deputation circulated by Mr. Purvis in his deputation tonight. So it's important to understand the purpose of the report tonight in the agenda. So this is part of our usual process when we do capital projects. We go to consultation. If we get objections, we bring the matter back to council. So the purpose of this report is that in council's budget this year was money to widen Walcott Avenue. We've received some objections to that, so we're putting the report to council to determine should the city do that work and widen Walcott Avenue, or should it undertake one of the other options. And we're recommending that the widening not occur. So it's important to understand that. The written deputation talked a bit about LPS 17 and things like this, but this isn't a report that requires a planning approval. A road construction or widening or reconstruction doesn't require a planning approval under the LPS 17, so it's not about that. There was discussion about terminating the road and creating it into a cul-de-sac as well. Again, that's a different process. So the process that's followed there needs to be if council were of that mind, that it's a road closure process where there's public advertising, inviting public submissions, and then any objections are referred back to council. So the purpose of this report isn't in relation to that. There's also Henley Brook Avenue, some consultation going on in relation to that, and there was some comments in the written deputation about the four-way intersection at Walcott Avenue with Henley Brook Avenue, which has always been in the planning. And again, that will be a separate report to council in relation to the feedback on that consultation. So there is, the staff view is very clearly that some work has to be undertaken on the actual road pavement itself. What we're proposing is not as a full reconstruction as what was originally proposed, but some remedial work, some maintenance, some mill and fill work at the intersections, and then a resealing the whole road. And so that will get some extra time out of the road pavement. Again, the length of time will depend on the traffic volume, so it might be 5 years, it might be 10 years until we have to come back in and reconstruct. And in that time, we're intending to undertake some further modelling. And it needs to be emphasised that irrespective of what happens in here, Mr Purvis hit the nail on the head, that traffic volumes are going to increase. Urbanisation is going to lead to that, irrespective of what decision council makes in relation to Walcott Avenue. The modelling that we've got at the moment, which is high level based on main roads data, indicates that there'd be up to 9,000 vehicles per day on Walcott, but that would drop down rapidly once Henley Brook Avenue is constructed. So the important thing with road planning through that area is the construction of Henley Brook Avenue, and certainly Drumpelia Drive has done a lot of good work in terms of taking some of that traffic volume, but all the modelling indicates that we also need Henley Brook Avenue as well, and that will also assist taking some of the traffic off West Swan Road. So one of the other things that's come into consideration very late in the piece is the federal government's announced funding for the grade separation at West Swan Road and Reid Highway, and that will enable us to do some planning now for the tying in of Henley Brook Avenue into the south section. It makes more sense to construct from the south heading north, so we can get some benefit to those people in the that urban development there. At the moment, we're constructing it from the north heading south, but only because we don't know what the tie-in details are going to be down the south. Now we do know that, so we can be looking at going the other way. So that's the more medium-term solution to the problem. And also undertaking some more modelling which will refine those traffic volumes. But irrespective of whatever decision council makes, as urban development, there's going to be more vehicles going through there. There's going to be more traffic, irrespective of any decision that council makes. If it's not going down Walcott Avenue, it will be going somewhere else, most likely heading west on Walcott, then getting down onto Everglades, and then out onto Ewaldene Road and Drumpelia.
Thank you, Mr Coaten. I'll take a quick question from Councillor Lucas, and I'll move on to the next because we're rapidly running out of time, and we can direct questions to any of the staff during the week. Thank you, Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, Mr Coaten. I've read all the objections and again tonight from Mr Purvis, and many of them don't want any work done. But is that an option, seeing that the road pavement is starting to fail? What would be the consequences if we didn't do some sort of repair work?
Well, it is an option. Staff believe it's not a particularly good one. So if no work's done, the road will just continue to deteriorate, and it's difficult to tell how long it would last, depending on the traffic volumes. But it was on this, irrespective of the widening, it was on this year's program for reconstruction. So staff believe that something needs to happen there, and that's why we're recommending, a comparatively lower cost treatment for it, which will get us, we estimate between 5 to 10 years life out of the pavement.
Thank you, and I'll ask further questions during the week as to what will happen to the $1.4 million. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take the last question. Councillor Zeno, a quick one if you will.
Mr Mayor, it's not a question, I'm just advising that 5.2 will be withdrawn. I'm withdrawing
I've already got it. Thank you. Okay. Executive Manager, Community Wellbeing, anything you wish to address on your item? Briefly?
No, Mr Mayor. Happy to take a question if there was anything.
Okay. Doesn't look like there is any, so we'll move on. Executive Manager, Stakeholder Relations, any particular issue that needs addressing from your point of view?
No, Mr Mayor.
No. Anything to be raised? Councillors, no alternate recommendations required on that? Thank you. CEO or Manager of Governance and Strategy?
I'll take any questions, Mr Mayor.
If I may.
Councillor Anderson, quickly, thank you.
Our 5:30 meeting starts have been quite effective. Why is there any appetite for us to make changes per 7.1, but at a 5:30 start rather than 6?
Up to council, Mr Mayor.
We'll probably know that next Wednesday, I reckon. Okay, any of those items, councillors, that wish to withdraw? Quick one, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Amanda. With the procurement item, which is 2.1, effectively that's really basically giving the CEO the approval to approve any spending that's under 250,000. So that's increased that by another from 150 to 250. So is that the main? Reading through that, that's the main thing that this policy review is proposing.
Ms Albright.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, through you. So the procurement policy sets the threshold for where you have to go out to tender, but that's actually set in the regulations. So under 250,000, you do not have to go out to public tender. Over 250,000, you do. The delegation for the CEO is set out in our delegations. So whether or it's not the threshold for 250,000 is about whether you have to publicly advertise. It's not about the delegation that the CEO has.
So sorry, just then, because maybe I'm a bit confused then. So previously, this delegation was 150,000 prior to COVID.
No, previously in the regulations, the threshold for going out for public tender was 150,000, and at the same time that COVID occurred, the government took the opportunity to increase that threshold to 250,000, and that increase stays in place. It's not related to COVID-19.
Oh, great! So it's a state government thing in the regulations.
It's in the regulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Okay, councillors, as we come to the end of the time, any other items that are listed there, either confidential or anywhere else that councillors wish to withdraw?
I'd like to ask questions, Mr Mayor.
Well, you've got about a minute and a half, if you wouldn't mind. Otherwise, I'll get you to direct them to staff during the week.
I guess the question is, Mr Mayor, they're relatively important to, I think, councillors need to hear the questions about 3.2. So I guess my question is, Rise Networks...
Mr Mayor, it's confidential.
It is a confidential item, councillor, so